Sweet. Okay, so welcome everybody to Contract Law A, Laws 11061. And I'm super pumped. This is going to be a great term. I've already met quite a number of you online, which is awesome. If you haven't had a chance to engage with Moodle yet, there is a whole stack of stuff up on Moodle. Can I have a show of hands as to who has managed to get into Moodle yet? Have you managed to get into Moodle yet? Yes? Sweet. Okay. The thing that bothered me, I guess, the other day is I had a look on AIMS because there's this sorry, in my head I had the words spy function, but it's not actually a spy function. It's an analytic that allows me to see who has interacted with Moodle in the last week and who hasn't. It starts counting as of 2 weeks before term. And there was a disturbing number of people as of this morning that hadn't even logged into Moodle once yet. So if you haven't logged into Moodle, can you please do so? Now, in the event that can I have a show of hands, or just tell me in the chat box, who is doing their first term with me this term? So Tommy's, Billy's, a couple people. Okay, what I might do, Melissa is also. Okay, what I might do briefly is just, I'm gonna do the, share everything. I will, now here we go. This is us, alrighty? Now, if you have done your Foundations of Academic Integrity unit, you will have access to our Moodle unit. Okay, so this is what you will find. Normally I put something silly up there to keep things light and entertaining. The place you need to go first, I'd probably, close everything first so you can see how to navigate around, and then click on week 1. Okay, because week 1 is where all the welcome stuff is, and there it is. Okay, so that's where our Zoom link is, but our Zoom link is also up here as well, just on the introductory part, and it tells you a little bit about the organisation of this week and next week. So this week and next week are what I call O weeks. Okay, it's just particularly for the first termers. We've got a joint Zoom that we had last night with John Milburn's Introduction to Law class, the Laws 11057 Introduction to Law. Because they are doing a little bit of skills building stuff in the first couple of weeks that we are also doing in the first couple of weeks. So I thought it might be fun for you guys to have the opportunity to meet some extra people and to meet John and to get a bit of exposure to some of the skills material that they're doing, because it might give you a bit of a different take on the skills material that we are doing. So in that week 1 tab, I just give you a bit of a heads up as to how that's all going to work. In terms of moving forward, what you'll see when you jump onto Moodle is the prescribed reading for each week, some extra stuff that you may or may not want to do in terms of preparation, and then I'll list out all of your resources for that week that are other than the prescribed text. Okay, so under other resources you'll find all of the videos, And normally I'll put my Prezi up for that week as well, and the study guide. What I do want to say about the study guide is please don't rely on the study guide and think that you'll get through contract A or B. Am I right, Tam? You need, the way I look at study guides, they are useful as a bit of a bird's eye overview. My only issue with these study guides, and I'd actually be interested to get your point of view, Tam. I thought, I didn't write these study guides, and I'm kind of in the process of rewriting them. But I thought that they were a little long. What did you think, Tam?
Yeah, I think that it almost it's just, yeah, it's too lengthy, and I think that the text has way more information that you'll get out of it than a study guide.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a double handling, because often I feel as though the study guide just duplicates kind of what's already in the text.
If it doesn't duplicate it, it summarises it, but it summarises it too much to the point that then if you do rely on it, then you're missing out on important stuff that's actually in the text.
Yeah, important stuff. So my best advice to you guys, I think the study guides, if you're a study guide person, then by all means feel free to utilise that, and I'll tell you how I would utilise that in a minute. But don't by any stretch of the imagination think that because the study guides range anywhere from 12 to 30 pages, don't think that they are a satisfactory substitute for the readings each week. You'll find that you really won't. I wouldn't confidently even say that you'd be able to pass the unit just on the basis of study guides.
Well, I don't think you'll pass the exam, put it that way.
No, you wouldn't. No, absolutely not. And it's the same format for exams this time as it was for you, Tam. So the way I would do it is this. I would look at my videos probably first, because they will give you a relatively good overview of the week's material. I don't propose this term to just rehash what is in the chapter in my videos. In my videos, what I will try to do is give you some interesting other stuff. If there is things in the chapter that I feel need clarification or some explanation, then I'll go through those in my videos. But apart from that, what I'm expecting of you is to read the text yourselves. Now, once I've done that, I would probably then have a little look at the study guide. Now, the way I would read that is I would just skim it, okay? Just to give yourself a bit of a bird's eye view of the chapter ahead in Wilmot, okay? The things that I like about those study guides, though, is that they do have a few test yourself questions in there. So if you are a test yourself kind of person, then you could go back to the study guides after you've read your text and just do a little bit of a self-test there if you wish to. Now, then I would probably go to the casebook. No, then I would go to the text, because the text will give you the principles and the detailed information that you'll need to get straight in your head before you confront the casebook, okay? That is the way I would confront your readings for each week. So videos first, quick skim of the study guide, then the text, then the casebook will really flesh it out for you. And by the time you hit the end of your readings in the casebook, it's really useful to know that your brain will be starting the process of deep learning, because the more times that you pass over a particular set of principles or subject matter, the more your brain will start to deeply learn it. So you've had one pass with the video, you've had another pass with your skim of the study guide, then you've had another pass with the textbook, and another pass with the casebook. So by the time you've hit the end of the casebook, you've had 4 different passes over the same set of principles. And here's the real kicker, the fifth ingredient, is actually leaving yourselves time at the end of the week, or beginning, or whenever you decide to do your readings, to actually sit down and go and have a look at the tutorial stuff before the tutorial, and try and make, even if it's only 20 minutes a week, I would really encourage you to do this. Sit down and actually tap out an answer, because this is the crazy way your brain works. Reading and going over things repetitively only gets you so far, but to really cement learning into your brain, it has to actually be forced to do something with the information it's just been given. And by sifting through the principles that you've read about each week and trying to formulate your thoughts onto a piece of paper, it will actually really help you learn this stuff. And I think I can speak with some confidence that the students that have actually sat down, I mean, this week we're just doing a little bit of theory, but from next week onwards, we will be doing some problem questions. And I'll just take you to the week 2 one. If you sit down and you actually try and nut out a written answer to this, I'm more than happy. I am more than happy to take your written work for feedback. So if you want my comments on what you've done each week, I'm more than happy for you to send stuff in to me for comment. I didn't get too many takers last term, but I tell you what, the term before that, I had a lot of takers, and the ones that stuck with it, even if it was just for the first half of term, the ones that stuck with that regular problem-solving practice really improved over the course of the first 4 to 6 weeks. It was amazing how much people had improved by then. So if you wish to avail yourself of that avenue of learning, I'm more than happy to work with you on that. So that's your weekly task. There is around about 100 pages or so of material to get through each week. Sometimes I think, Tam, you probably feel like your eyes are going to bleed. But, you know, this is, you know, it's tertiary education, it's law, and, you know, this is the stuff you'll be confronting. Amazingly, this is not the most reading intensive unit that you will do. So it's just a matter of getting used to and planning around your weekly workload, okay? John Milburn did mention something last night, which I think is worth reiterating with you guys. If you go up to the top of your Moodle page, you will see the assessment that we have for the unit on the left-hand side. The first one you can see is the online quiz, and that's due in week 4. Your first big one, though, is a written assessment that's due in January, right just after Christmas, conveniently. How great is that? Gotta love term 3. But that one, week 7. So you will have had about 6 good weeks worth of IRAC practice by then, or problem solving practice. So you should be well on your way to feeling half confident when you submit that. I would encourage you to, with all of your written assessments, to pop those into a diary if you have one, or I would even encourage you guys to start using time management apps or to-do lists. There is a great app actually called To Do and I find that very helpful. But it's really, with law, it will really be all about the planning as much as the execution. If you can give yourself maximum time to do your readings without stress, to have a bit of a play about with the tutorial work, and to do a bit of practicing, when it comes to doing your actual accessible work, you will feel much more comfortable. And if you've planned for that accessible work, always try and get going with it as soon as you can, and don't leave it till the last moment. Famous last words, I know, but I think wise ones nevertheless. I'll normally give you a bit of a hurry up when things are due, but that would be my big hot tip to you. Put everything into your diary and plan it all out. Plan your weeks out. And another thing John mentioned last night, which I think is also worth reiterating, is well-being. Make sure that you get plenty of sleep, plenty of rest, that you still manage to do some stuff that you like, and if necessary, schedule it into your to-do list. I know last year I had a crazy busy year, and I actually put go for a run into my to-do list. So make sure that you do that. In terms of well-being, are you all familiar with the CQ University Law Students Intranet? Can I get a thumbs up, thumbs down? Yep. Oh, thumbs down? A few thumbs down. Okay, all right. What I will do is, let's go on to Facey. Now, I think that so here is our Facebook page for Contract A. If you haven't joined, you are more than welcome. On this page, you will find a stack of non-essential stuff. Let me say that again. Non-essential stuff. So if you are a Moodle person and you're not a Facebook person, do not stress about this at all. This is just an extra platform that I like to run because I'm a talker, okay? And I like to have a level of communication with students that I find just doesn't ordinarily happen with Moodle, unfortunately. The university did play around with an awful platform called UCrew. Did you ever get onto that one, Tam? Did you ever?
Yeah, it was no good.
Yeah. Not great reports from that. So the university's
Facey's awesome.
Yeah, Facey I think is a bit better. And now that we have social learning units on Facebook, it's a lot less busy. And I'll talk about the busyness of Facebook in just a second. But if you go down to here, so course-related posts, and I've just put in there the intranet link. Where is it? Might be up here. Here it is. I will copy this and pop it into the chat box for you. Let's do that now. I'll stop. Should I stop sharing? I think I have to stop sharing in order to put it in the thing, don't I? Yeah, there it is. There you go. That's the intranet for law students. And there is a point for me actually bringing that up, and that is it has a whole lot of stuff on there in relation to wellbeing, and some really great tips and advice for newbie law students. Okay, so do check that out, and there's other stuff worth exploring in there as well. So do check that out. I would really recommend that. If you missed the link that I've just put into the chat box, the link is also in your week 1 study guide. Okay, so there's that there as well. Now, in terms of Facebook, for those that are familiar with Facebook, you're probably more familiar with something that looks a little bit like this. So you just have a wall of discussions, and it all gets a little bit busy. Sometimes I post stupid stuff, and, some students really don't like that if they've got a bit of a, business focus, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. So what I've done is I've changed it into a social learning group, which is a new little beastie that Facebook has brought out. But it does allow us to filter and focus things a little bit more effectively. So when you land into the Contract A Facebook group, you will see that I have split things up into various different things. So I've posted some stuff up for the skills module. I've posted some stuff up for theories and so forth. And so it's quite clean. You don't feel overwhelmed when you hit the page. But if you do want to engage with your people, you just click the discussion menu item, and there you have it all. Everyone all chatting with each other. So if you want to do a shout out and start forming study groups and stuff like that, that is the place to post in the discussions. But do hop on, have a paddle about, see if you like it. If you do, that's great. If you don't, as I said, certainly nothing essential on there. It's just an extra forum for a bit of additional communication support. I like to have my units running like a community. We're really all about building a community in terms of my units, and helping each other, doing a bit of social learning. And I think that's really important because law is a talking discipline. Originally, I don't know if you know this, but originally there was no university degree to become a lawyer. The way that you became a lawyer was by sitting around the traps, by going to the Inns of Court, by watching barristers, by forming relationships, by talking to people, hopefully getting a tutelage and learning that way on the job. So it really is all about the talking. I know I'm doing a bit much talking tonight, but that's the way that usually the week one goes. So please, if you want to have a chat with me on there, don't feel shy or embarrassed to post a question or make a comment, post up something silly. It's all about us just getting to know each other as a community, and to get you to learn to feel a bit more confident with your own voice, because your voice will be extraordinarily important during your degree. That's what it's really all about at the end of the day. What I see at the end of your assignment is your voice. What I see in your Zoom participation is your voice. What I read on the paper after your exam is your voice. As you move on through your degree, you'll be getting group assignments, and it will be particularly important to have that social learning kind of focus there and develop a group voice and present effectively as a group. So the more you can learn to talk, pipe up, have your 2 cents, have your say, the happier I'll be, the happier you'll be, and hopefully you'll feel a bit more satisfied with your studies. So that's FACEY. Now, one thing I did want to say before I leave the issue of FACEY is, for those that aren't familiar with it, it can get a little overwhelming if you do see, like up here, a number of notifications. Some people can't stand notifications. There's that glaring, oh my gosh, I just got another notification. What am I going to do? I've got 12 things to say to people. If you don't like notifications, and you just want to pop into Facebook every now and again, perhaps just when you've got a question, and then pop back out again for several weeks, doesn't bother me at all. The way that you avoid getting the notifications is through this little button here. Okay, so if you want to mute me, and my family would say yes, just click off there. If you don't want to get rid of notifications for the whole of the group, but just one particular post might be really blowing up and it's annoying the heck out of you, and you just want to silence the comments, notifications for the comments on that particular post. And you go up to the 3 little dots on a post and you click on that, and there you see turn off notifications for this post. Okay, so that's the way that you can get a little bit of peace and quiet from Facebook if you decide to join. Of course, if you join and then you think, oh my gosh, this is a seething mass of animals in a zoo, then you just click on this joined button, and you can either unfollow the group, which means you don't hear anything from us, or you can actually leave the group, and that's perfectly fine too. As I said, everything for this unit will be right on good old Moodle, that hopefully some of you will be familiar with if this is not your first term. So here we are back at Moodle. I'll just briefly go through the assessment tasks for you. You should already know a little bit about these, given that they are all set out in your unit profile. You do have 2 online quizzes. The first of those, as I said, is due in week 4. So plan that out, please. You'll find here we are, online quiz, Friday of week 4. You can see there. The second one, Friday of week 12. Then, as I said, you got that kind of large-ish 40% written assignment, week 7. So you should be fairly cracking with your problem analysis by that stage. Friday, week 7, map that in, block it in, Eddie. Then you got 2 things due. Now, I put these in red for a reason. Technically, both of these assignments are due in week 12, but they're not. Why are they not? Because I will open that the second quiz. Bill. I'm just going to mute you, Bill. So the second quiz, Friday of week 12, I will open that 2 weeks before it's due. You will have ample time to do that before that cutoff date if you wish. Similarly, the tutorial participation exercise, that's 5%. And I want to draw this to your attention. Yes, it's only 5%, but it's 5% almost for nothing. Have a look at the description in the unit profile. It's not a whole, it's not a whole lot of work. It's just a very short couple paragraph reflection on your journey through the tutorials, what you've learnt, lessons that you've picked up, and your personal thoughts on interacting with your peers. Okay, 5%. Now, that you are able to submit any time during term. Okay, I would strongly recommend you wait until after the midterm break, but if you wish to do it earlier, that's perfectly fine too. The thing with the tutorial participation exercise is that if you do leave it till later in term, say, for example, you've got your eyes on the prize and you want to really focus on the written assessment in week 7, that's perfectly fine. And if you say, well, I'm going to do my tutorial participation reflection in maybe week 10, then you think back and you think, oh, I've got writer's block. I can't figure out what I thought about each week's tute. It's super useful if you've made yourself some notes and pop them up onto the Moodle discussion forum so that you can look back through what you've said over the different weeks and you can see how you've progressed in your thinking, okay? Obviously, the best reflections are the most insightful ones that can tell me clearly, how you've progressed during term, how you feel that you've progressed during term. And so this is why I've been saying in the week 1 discussion forum this week, try and do something little each week, even if it's not a whole lot, so that you have something there that you can look back on and compile your reflection with. Okay? So,
can I pop in here for a minute,
sure.
AJ? Sure. I can give everyone feedback from when I did contract A. Lots of people panicked at the last minute because they, for whatever reason, whether it be personal reasons, work reasons, whatever it may be, they didn't do anything on the discussion boards. They were unable to attend the tutorials. And when it came time to do this, lots of people actually didn't end up doing it at all. And 5% is 5%. If you're, that little bit behind, that 5% could mean everything. So I really encourage everybody to focus on that task, because that's the one thing that everyone actually did forget about when I did it.
Yeah. And that's typically the way that it goes. So if we can avoid that, heaps, that would be really, really good. As Tam said, 5 marks is 5 marks, and it can be the difference between, a distinction and a high distinction, a credit and a pass, a fail and a pass, So the other thing is, you want to give yourself as much of a buffer before you hit the end of term exam as you possibly can. I don't know if you stressed kind of at the last, during the back end of term, last term, but I think everybody does that mental exercise, do I have enough to get an HD? Do I have enough to get a credit or whatever it is that you're aiming for? And then if you've really just skated by with your other pieces of assessment, it really does put an unnecessarily large weight on your shoulders when it comes to performance in the end of term exam. I'll talk much more about exams towards the end of term. But the end of term assessment for this term, we have a centrally scheduled exam. And that will be in the exam block. And the exam block for this term will be starting late February. Okay. So we won't know what the exact exam date is until Central Exams schedule all of that stuff. But please don't leave your dash for marks in this unit right up to the exam. It's not a pleasant experience having to go into the exam and actually, sing for your supper, in terms of actually just having to get enough marks to pass the unit. It's not fun. So get in and diarise all of those assessments. Make sure you're familiar with the due dates. The skills week. Well, before we go on, do we have any questions about that stuff? Queries, questions, stuff I haven't made sense on, which is usually often.
I can say, you guys, to try and use AJ as much as you can with your stuff. Like if you've got IRACs or anything like that you want to send through, take advantage of it. It's a free service to get some marks, some feedback to be able to improve your written assessment. I found it myself an absolutely integral part of my learning. I started off pretty douchey with my IRACs and they progressed really, really well. So, and that was only with the feedback that I got from AJ. So it's a service that's sitting there, use it.
Yeah. And that all comes down to, as I said before, just leaving yourself enough time of a week. Even if you've only got 20 minutes to tap out an answer, it's better than nothing at all. And if you do want to send it in to me, like I said, I'll be more than happy to look at it for you. So segueing nicely into skills, this week and next week we have some skills material to look at. Tam, this would probably be all different to what you did. There's been some rejigging of the unit, and I've deliberately pulled. There used to be a skills week in week 6, and
it was too late.
Yeah,
way too late.
Yeah. What you really want to do, I think, is particularly while you're all enthusiastic at the beginning of term, woohoo, out of the gates, run. Harness that energy and get going on the skills stuff sooner rather than later. I never really saw the sense in leaving it until the week before your assignment was due. Maybe it was to cater for the 90% of people that write it the night before, but I thought that really was far too late in term. So what I want to do is utilise the whole of the week's materials that we have to get through, and brilliantly then, doing the skills stuff at the beginning. Not only do we get to start practicing on all of this practical stuff early, but what it does is it leaves us week 12. And week 12 then allows us to go back and in detail go through the stuff that we need for the exam. And I think Tam really probably was one of the students that got the most out of this time last term, because typically in week 11, I will really start to focus in on the exam. And week 12, we really don't have any substantive content to get through at all, which is gold, because we can spend the entire Zoom just reviewing what we need to know about the exam and where the different questions will be drawn from, what weeks they'll be drawn from, and what my general approach will be for the exam. Okay, so, and it will also give you almost like an extra, so far as contract is concerned, it will give you like an extra week's worth of revision time, practically. So that's the way I'm hoping this term will work, maybe a little bit more effectively for you guys. Now, do not stress is the other thing I want to say, because I've been already getting some people going, oh no, look at all this stuff I've got to do. What I wanted to do was show you this stuff on Moodle and say, there, really don't worry at all. There's not a whole lot that you need to get through. And for week 1, really you'll see at the beginning there, I've got the week that you need to make sure that you do that stuff. Okay, so for this week, really all you need to do is have a look at that little infographic. It's just like a 1-page infographic, or a couple of page, on how to write a good case note. The other one is I've done a video for you on writing case notes. And I go through the little exercise that we had to do this evening in terms of the Carlisle case note. Then for latter end of this week, and you just need to get it finished by the end of week 2, this is just 3 pages on legal problem solving and IRAC. My IRAC top tips, which I think you'll find quite useful. Make sure that you definitely read that top tips document before you submit your written assignment. And then there's another slightly longer little article there on the IRAC method. Now, what I will be doing this term, because I know that there are quite a number of people in this cohort that like to have a bit of additional stuff to look at just for interest's sake. Now, if you're one of those people, great, I'm throwing this stuff up for you guys. If not, and you're busy and you're super focused, that is okay. You will not, anything that I mark as optional will be just absolutely just for interest. Okay, so do not feel that you have to get through everything. This is just purely for people that have the time and the luxury to be able to go and wallow around in some extra stuff. Okay. The only thing I probably would recommend before you hand up your assignment is that little drop-in Zoom. I don't think it was in Tam's cohort. It was in the one before Tam's. Just on my thoughts on IRAC. For week 2, we have this little, it's about a 20-odd minute video on precedent, and we have the GRAW reading. and that's 38 pages, I think it is. So not a whole lot there in terms of actual reading that you need to get through for week 2, despite the fact that when you kind of log in, it looks it looks somewhat formidable, but it's actually a lot friendlier than you thought. So please don't panic. For week 1, you needed to get through, as I said, the videos. If you want to have a look at the study guide, that's fine. In my view, the study guide's optional, but anyway. And for this week, it was Paterson. Now, what I might do is leave our quick discussion of Paterson until the end, or I'll actually, I'm going to stop sharing now. I was playing around with this before. I'm going to do a poll. How exciting. Okay, I'm going to end the old poll. So I got an overwhelming 87% response on people liking contract law. That's awesome. I'll share the results of that. There we go. Okay, let's do a new poll. Oh, I can't do a new poll. Can you only do one poll per Zoom? Darn.
I'm sure I've had more than one in another subject.
Another Zoom?
Yeah.
Oh. Who wants to do our case note now, and who wants to talk about theory now? Which way do you want to do it, folks? Case note or theory? Theory? Theory. 2 votes for theory. 3 votes for theory. Yes? All right, let's talk about theory. And this is the other thing you should probably know about me. I'm fairly Socratic, and I'm fairly discussion oriented in my tutes. So what I will do is I will pose my question that I posed on Moodle, and let's see if we can get some discussion around that. And that is, my proposition was, studying theory is a waste of time. No, I think I said a useless waste of time. What we need to focus on is the operation of legal principle. Hit me with your best shot, peeps. Who's going to be first? Is theory a waste of time? Come on, you know you want to. You can feel it burning on the tip of your tongue. Theory a waste of time? No? Steph just says no. Megan says no. Okay. You're in, oh, okay, Steph, no worries. That's all right. I won't tease you, I promise, Steph. Theory, you know, you've probably seen my videos on theory. Let's ease our way into it, okay? Tell me, it's been hard to read. Yes, I know. It is a little dry, and that's why I'd probably say touch base with my videos on it, because it might give you a bit of a fresh perspective on what you've read. It can be dry indeed. The theory I'd particularly like to flag for you, and I bet you all think I'm going to say relational contracting, and it's not. Classical contract theory. Tell me about that. What are the main tenets? The main underpinning assumption? And if you saw my video, it's the theory that you would probably associate with Mel Gibson.
Is it about making a contract between, is it like a private contract between two people?
That's it. Yes, it emerged out of the laissez-faire philosophy that was very, very popular around the 1850s onwards. And that's all about leave the parties alone, minimal state intervention, let them conclude their own private treaties in peace. Yeah, Amy says we're able to bargain for ourselves. Absolutely. That was one of the tenets of classical contract theory. What theory did it draw on? And promise theory also drew from this. Yes, Steph. Will theory. So what is that all about? Does it mean that contract law only applies to people called Will? What's that all about? Will theory. Will of the contracting parties. Yes, the contract is designed to reflect the will of the parties. Very, very strongly tied into that laissez-faire individualist perspective, isn't it? Leave the parties the heck alone, let them hash out a bargain that suits them and their own will, okay? A court's job is simply to look at what's on the page and enforce the party's will, because we've got to give them as much freedom to contract as possible. What is the other theory that feeds into classical contract theory? Very closely aligned to that laissez-faire, leave them alone, they'll work it all out kind of approach.
Promise theory.
Promise. Yes. I'm thinking of a more mathematical.
Free market sort of capital, extreme capitalist market.
The economic school of thought, yes. And in jurisprudence, you will go into the Chicago School of Thought much more in depth than we do here. But yes, absolutely, because the whole rise of the laissez-faire philosophy went hand in hand pretty much with the development of that whole idea of the rational maximizer. Just everyone is going to be far better off if we leave people to work it out for themselves, because everyone is a self-interested, rational maximizer, and they will do what is in their own best interests. And if you leave them alone, then the resources are going to be distributed appropriately, and we're going to have minimal market failure, and the world will be a better place. That very much goes hand in hand with classical contract theory, and in fact, the reboot of all of that is now basically called neoclassical contract theory, which very firmly weds those ideas together. Problems with the classical approach?
Well, I'd say just going back to the will of the contracting parties, it's hard to know when you've got a contract that's black and white, and the courts only determine what's written in black and white. Often there's going to be stuff. The reason why it goes to court is because there's something that the parties haven't thought of, and therefore it's not written down. So you can't really say that that it's an expression of the will of the parties if it doesn't exist, if it wasn't written down. So the contract itself is incomplete. It doesn't tell the whole picture of the will of the parties.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big fat hole in the theory, really, isn't it? It's somewhat, in more technical terms, it would lessen the explanatory power of that particular theory, in my view, anyway. Obviously, there are rationalizations that you can make to account for the reasons why the state intervenes in certain circumstances and will, allow intervention where, for example, there's been unfairness or whatever. But how do you reconcile that with the will of the parties? How do you reconcile the court in plain terms, like Damien said? There are some weaknesses around the edges. Promise theory, someone's already talked. Was that Amy? Did you pipe up and say something about promise theory? It's kind of aligned with this one, isn't it? Well, they're kind of, I would call them twins.
Well, because promise theory is similar to classical theory in that it involves each party fulfilling their promise.
Yeah.
So if they're fulfilling their promise, then they're fulfilling their will.
Yeah, it's very closely aligned to this idea of the individual, and you need to do what the individual wants if you're talking about the will theory, or what the individual has promised if you're talking about the promise theory. What is the slightly different nuance that we get with promise theory? Rather than having the economic undertones of the rational self-maximizer, what kind of worldview does a promise theorist have of humanity? Moral. Steph jumped in so quickly. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very morality-based theory. And you don't see that a whole lot, I guess, in this day and age of constant discussion about the economic rationalisation for everything. Morality sometimes tends to get lost in the dust a bit. But yeah, voluntary promise, yes. Amy, tell me about voluntary promises. What do they say about voluntary promises according to the promise theory? Should a court enforce them?
Hopefully you can hear me because my internet's really dodgy today. But I think that voluntary promise just means that the idea of the promise theory is that both parties enter into the contract voluntary, so they'll keep the contract as they're morally obligated. That was my understanding, but I'm not too sure.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things that ties it quite closely to the will theory. And that whole laissez-faire school of thought. These are individual parties. You have to respect their individuality and respect their decision to either enter an arrangement or not enter an arrangement. And if they do so, it must necessarily be voluntarily. If it's not going to reflect their will, if you're a will theorist, so classical. Or if you're talking about promises, then you're not enforcing their promise if it's not voluntarily given. What about promises? And this is slightly different twist. What about gratuitous promises? What's a gratuitous promise? Anyone pick that up from the readings? A gratuitous, not enforceable. Nice work, Steph. You're on fire tonight. Gratuitous promises is where, for example, I say to you guys, I'm going to give you all HDs. You have given me nothing in return, no work that would merit an HD. But I'm promising you something without you giving me anything in return. And promise theorists would say that that should still be enforceable, interestingly enough. I should still be made to keep that promise because, yes, Amy, the law doesn't enforce them because of the lack of consideration. But a promise theorist would say, you know what, I don't think the whole idea of consideration is so great anyway. I think the more important thing is the morality. And we should enforce this promise because it's a promise. And this person should be made to keep it because it's the right thing to do. Wow. What's the difference between a promise and a legal undertaking in a contract sense? A promise, when you are reading it judicially, has the connotation that it's intended to be a legally binding obligation. Okay? A legal undertaking is a technical term for something that you'll more than likely learn in civil procedure. A legal undertaking in its technical term of art means a document, a solemn document, often executed as a deed, that warrants the truth or otherwise of something, or that someone will do something or not do something. That is the technical term for legal undertaking, a legal undertaking document. But if you're talking about just a legal undertaking in terms of I undertake to sell you my car, that would be a legal undertaking in a loose sense, because it's clearly intended to be a legally enforceable promise. Yes? Voluntary and voluntary. Yes, a gratuitous. Are you talking about, Damien, are you talking about gratuitous promises there?
Oh, no, just saying that a legal undertaking, I would think, would have the connotation that it's an involuntary thing, as in if you're enforcing a legal undertaking, then it's a mandated thing. It's not a, hey, let's agree to do this, like a promise is.
A legal undertaking is a one-sided affair. So it's a party saying to another party, I undertake that I will do this. For example, I undertake that I will not move this money from this particular bank account. And it's executed oftentimes in a deed as a very solemn representation of your intention to do or not do something. And there's almost never consideration given for that undertaking, which is why it's often in a deed form. Which actually, Damien, segues us nicely. What's the difference between a simple contract and a deed? Who's read Gruel? Anyone read Gruel? Aha. A simple contract is a contract that requires consideration, and a deed is a promise that you wish to have legally enforceable, but it has no consideration. So if you were just leaving it to an ordinary contract and you both signed it, the fact that one person's promising another something without any consideration being given for that promise means that it would not normally be legally enforceable. The only thing that would make that promise legally enforceable would be the form in which that promise was made. And if you do it in a special form, which we call a deed, then you can get around the whole idea of consideration. Okay. Okay, so we've done will, we've done promise, we've done classical, relational. Consent theory. What was the difference between the consent school and kind of like the will / classical / promise people on the other side, the consent people on that side? What's the main difference between those two schools of thought? Contract law operates what? How? Megan, yes, transferring rights to another. Exactly. So the consent theorists would say, okay, it's all very well to say that, you know, the parties will something to be the case. That's what they want to be the case, and that's how the courts should enforce it, or they promise this way, that's how the courts should enforce it. But really, what we need to do is look underneath that, because it's no good wanting to do something or wanting to promise something unless you've got something to promise about. So they say, let's look deeper. Let's look at law as a system of rights for transferring things, contract law in particular, as a system of rights for transferring things. And that's how a consent theorist would look at it. Very much based on an outward manifestation of consent. Problems with that theory? Everyone's looking. Implied terms. What about things like click wrap licenses, where you just click on I agree and you haven't read any of the terms and conditions? What would the consent theorists say then? Have you consented? Yeah, they say that you accept the risk. Yeah, exactly. Not they have consent unless it was unreasonable. Yeah, unless it was far and beyond what you would expect in the ordinary case. Yeah. So you see, all of them really have to do a bit of a fancy footstep, really, around certain parts of contract law, don't they? So we haven't yet come across a grand theory of the contract universe. I don't know that that's really ever possible. Yeah, we haven't found our lovely Stephen Hawking, bless his soul, for contract law theory as yet. However, Ian McNeil's really cool. Relational contracting I like because it draws from empirical roots and it does look at the messiness of what goes on in the swamp. So the socio-legal theorists like to talk about it as. Relational contracting, I have put up a few thought pieces on Facebook for you to read. Lovely Mr. Justice Leggett, bless him, keeps trying to introduce relational contracting theory into English decisions and has had another crack in March this year. If you're interested in reading a little bit more about relational contracting, have a look at those, the pieces that I put up for you. I've also put the links to the articles about Mr. Justice Leggett's attempts at relational contracting theory on Moodle as well, in case you want to have a look. Does anyone want to go out on a limb and say they don't like relational contracting? If you don't, can you debate with me why you don't? Do you think it's not really a theory? I actually had someone say that to me. I think that that's probably a good point. It's not really a theory, is it? What does a theory do?
Theory is simple. Having a look at, I think it was in your first video or something about, what a theory is, universally, whether it's in science or wherever. And it should be simple and, I guess, predictive. I can't remember all the other reasons, but it's, I think it fails on that part where it's a simple, concise explanation of what's going on.
Yes. Whereas, and what it tries to do is to draw everything together with a nice neat bow and give it some encompassing kind of explanation. Whereas McNeil doesn't really do that. He just says, this is what I see happening. There is no real overarching grand design. He does talk about the spectrum, which is an interesting concept, and he has some norms that he comes up with, but it's not really a theory in the technical sense that we would kind of expect in legal theory. And I think that's a fair point. Anyway, anyone have any concluding remarks to say about theory? You've done very well. Very nicely done. Theory is one of those things, like we were saying, it can be a bit dry. But hopefully, after tonight, have a little think about what we've been saying and maybe go and pop a few thoughts onto Moodle just as a bookmark for you so that you can then, as Tam said, forensically go back and good riddance. You can go back and you can construct your thoughts and see if you feel any different at the end of term. Well, thank you very much for coming, guys. It was so nice to meet you all. Do make sure you chat with me on Facebook, chat with me on Moodle. I look forward to reading your thoughts after the shoot tonight. For those people that haven't had a chance to engage with the readings yet, feel free to pop something up on Moodle later on this week. Other than that, if you don't have any more questions, I'm going to run to my Contract B class. Yes? Yay! Thanks, guys. Bye.